Hello everyone, welcome to Drishti IAS. You're watching the NCERT Foundation series wherein we study the subject of political science or polity with the help of MCQs and PYQs wherever relevant. So without further ado, let's plunge right in. So let's first discuss quickly what we'll be covering today with our MCQs. With the help of our MCQs, we're going to study chapter 2 of our class 10 NCERT. The chapter is called Federalism and the key topics under discussion are definition and features of federalism, types of federations, coming together as well as holding together, federalism in the Indian context and decentralization. So all these 4 topics are going to be covered with the help of MCQs and this about sums up the entire chapter for you. Now, what exactly does federalism mean? Federalism means a form of government or a form of power sharing wherein a central authority shares its power with other units. All right. So there is a central authority, but it also shares power with other units. All right. Now what happens? These have their own sphere of influence. The central authority has its own sphere of influence and the other units, they may be provinces or states, all right, units, they have their own sphere of influence and the units are not answerable to the central authority. They're not answerable in their own domain. Okay, and this cannot dictate terms in their domain. If the sphere of influence, if it is the units or the states or the provinces or the regions, whatever, by whatever name you want to address these units as, if we are referring to their domain or their jurisdiction or their sphere of influence, then they cannot really pass orders, okay, and these are not answerable to the central authority, okay. This is very important to remember. As opposed to federalism, we have a unitary form of power sharing or a unitary form of government. What happens here? There is one central authority, even here, and there are some other subunits, even here. But what happens? These subunits are subordinate to the central authority in in unitary form of power sharing or unitary form of government. The subunits are subordinate to the central authority. Now here, what did I tell you? We cannot really, in this federal form of government, the central authority cannot really exert influence or pass orders directly to the subunits. Whereas here, we are explicitly stating that these are subordinate and hence central authority can pass orders. All right. And in some cases, it's not even necessary that there will be subunits. In some cases, it's required that there is only one level of government, which is the do-all and the be-all. All right. But in case where we have subunits, it's ideal in a unitary system that the central authority is going to be superior and can pass orders. Now let's quickly understand the principles or let's say key features of federalism. What are the features of federalism? Number 1, there will be at least 2 levels or 2 tiers of government. We just discussed. Number 2, both have their own jurisdiction, even though they govern the same citizens. All right. So they are governing same citizens, but have different Jurisdictions. What do you understand by jurisdictions? Jurisdiction basically means an area over which one holds legal authority. Now that area may be geographical area or it may also be a subject matter. The third feature is that these jurisdictions that we are discussing are constitutionally specified. What does constitutionally specified mean? That the constitution has demarcated the area for the central authority as well as the subunits, and they are guaranteed by the constitution. They are constitutionally guaranteed. Fourth, there cannot be a unilateral change to the constitution. All right? Because we are dealing with a federal system of government, federal form of power sharing, it means that any change to the constitution has to be brought on by both the levels. Okay? One level, the central level, cannot really, or the federal level, cannot really decide to unilaterally or single-handedly change the constitution or amend the constitution. That is the beauty of federalism. Fifth point, judiciary. Judiciary has the right to interpret the constitution, all right, as well as act as a referee or umpire, right? You watch matches, there's always a referee and an umpire, and judiciary or the courts, the high courts, the supreme courts have to act as an umpire in case of disputes arising between the two tiers. All right? Okay. Sixth is the provision of financial autonomy within the constitution. So they have their own ways, both these levels of government have their own ways of generating revenue, of raising revenue, all right? And finally, what is the purpose of federalism? Why do we need federalism? Because it helps maintain unity of the territory as well as accommodates regional diversity. All right? So there is a unifying element in the form of central authority, whereas all other regional aspects or regional elements are also taken care of and included in the form of your provinces or your states or your subunits. Different names in different countries. In India, we call them states. All right? Now that we have taken care of these 7 features or 7 elements of federalism, let's take a look at the options that we have. A, 2 or more levels of government govern the same citizens. Very first feature. Yes, it is a part of federalism, but we are talking about, we have to identify which of these is not a part of federalism. Jurisdictions of each tier are constitutionally guaranteed. Very well. 3. Central government can unilaterally alter power of state governments. No. This is what we discussed. The constitution cannot be unilaterally amended, and one part of the government or one form of the government cannot really single-handedly alter powers of the other part of the government. All right? And D, courts act as an umpire or referee in disputes between levels of government. Yes, this is also correct. So we have our correct option, which is option number C. This is not a feature of federalism, rather quite the contrary. Question 2. India's federal structure is described as a holding together federation. This implies that we have been given 4 statements. Now let's first discuss what does holding together federation mean. See, the term federation usually means a union of states. All right. Now, Indian Constitution does not explicitly use the term federation. Indian Constitution has not used the term federation. Okay. Now, this federation can be of two types. One is coming together. The other is holding together. What does coming together mean? Coming together means that there are various, let's say, territories or states or units that are willing to pool their sovereignty, which means they're not renouncing their sovereignty, they're just bringing together their sovereignty, their supreme authority within the territory. They're bringing it together, pooling it together, yet they are retaining their identity. All right, they are still retaining their identity, but they are doing all of this usually for security reasons. All right, so they are pooling their sovereignty, right, which means they are not giving up on their sovereignty, they're just collectivizing it. They're also retaining their identity, and they're doing it primarily for the purposes of better security. Example, the US. There's also Australia and Switzerland. These are the examples of coming together. They are coming together in order to form a federal government. Now, let's come to holding together. What happens in holding together? A large sovereign state is basically sharing power with multiple units. All right. Now, these units do not have independent sovereignty of their own, nor can they secede. They cannot leave the main sovereign. All right. This is holding together. This is found in India. All right. I hope that is clear. Going back to the question, let's look at the four statements. All constituent states have equal powers vis-a-vis the center. Is this a part of holding together federation? No. It's actually, though, a feature of the other one, coming together federation, because they already are very powerful states. They're strong vis-a-vis the central government, all right? And they have usually more or less equal powers, but not so in holding together. We have unequal powers in our constitution. You take the example even of the states like some of the northeastern states, which are included in Article 371, or the union territories. The central government tends to be more powerful and constituent units may have unequal power. This is actually correct about the holding together federation. States can withdraw from the federation without central consent. No, I told you there is no right to secede. Once they are in a holding together federation, they give up their right to secede. The federation was formed by pooling sovereignty for economic benefits alone. Again, no. Usually, pooling together is a part of coming together, and also that happens for security purposes. Of course, economic benefits could be a secondary reason, but the main reason is security. So, we have our correct answer, which is option B. The dual objectives of a federal system are, remember, point number 7. A, securing social justice and economic growth. No. B, ensuring equality of opportunity and national security. No. C, promoting unity of the country and accommodating regional diversity. Yes, this was the 7th principle of, or the key feature of federalism. D, balancing legislative, executive and judicial power. No, this is not actually the objective of federalism, all right? Although this may be a key feature, it's definitely not an objective. So we have our correct answer, which is option number C. Which of the following correctly describes residuary powers in India? Now let's discuss about residuary powers and what they mean. See, India has a federal structure. We are talking about India and we are discussing that it has a federal structure but with a unitary bias. Okay. So, the form of government and the form of power sharing is slightly inclined towards the center or the union. So, there are different levels of government. We discussed that as the very first feature. The different levels of government are the union government, the state government, and then the third level, which was introduced in 1992 by the 73rd and 74th constitutional amendments, the Panchayati Raj and the municipalities. All right. Now, these also have a different domain, different jurisdiction. Similarly, the original Constitution originally provided for two forms of government and their subject matters were discussed in the union list, the state list, and there was also a concurrent list. All right. Now, union list contains those subject matters on which only the central government can frame policies. Okay. The central government alone deals with these subjects that are contained in the union list. What are those? Those subjects are those that require a uniform policy. They are matters of national importance. Like what? Like banking, currency, communications, defense, and external affairs. All right. I hope this is clear. These are the matters of national importance and hence they need to be dealt with by the union government and also because they require a uniform or a homogeneous policy, right? Then there are some subjects, some items that are better dealt with at a local level or a state level. What are those? Those are subjects like irrigation, agriculture, trade and commerce, police, right? So these are better dealt with at the local or state level and they form the part of state list. State list has exclusive policy formulating power over these matters, just like central, the union list has those matters that are exclusively dealt with by the central government. Finally, we have a concurrent list wherein the power is shared between the two tiers or two levels of government. This includes issues like, let's say, forests, education, marriage, adoption, succession, and trade unions. All right. So these are issues or subject matters that are dealt with by both the state and the central government. Now, is this an exhaustive list? See, they tried to make it an exhaustive list. All right. They tried to contain as many subject matters or items that could be contained in the list as possible. However, there were a few matters that could not be contained in this list. So, for example, at that time when the list was being framed, was there any talk of internet, software? All these topics were not a part. All these matters were not matters at all back then. They did not exist. So, they were not included in these lists, in any of these lists. All right. So, these became residuary items, residuary matters. Now, our constitution has given the power to the central government to formulate policies or deal with or legislate on residuary matters. All right, this is really important. This is actually the forte of the central or the union government. All right, please remember this, and this is going to help us deal with the question. Correctly describes residuary powers. They belong exclusively to the states. No. They are shared between the center and the states. No, we ruled that out. They are vested in the union government. Yes, this is what we discussed. They are decided by the Supreme Court case by case. No, not really. C is our correct answer. Supreme Court will only intervene in case of a dispute between the two tiers or two levels of government. Otherwise, it will not intervene. Now, before we move forward, let me draw your attention to the NCERT online course for your UPSC foundation. The admissions are now open, so you can please go ahead and check this course out. You'll get 150 plus classes for a validity of 2 years. All right. Now, the catch over here is that if you purchase this NCERT online course and visit any of our offline physical centers to get enrolled in the IAS GS Foundation classroom course at any branch of Drishti IAS, you will receive a full fee waiver equivalent to the amount that you've paid for the online course. Now, if you want more information regarding this, you can please click on the link in the description, or you can call 87501 87501. Question 5. In a unitary system, the relation between the central and government and subunits is characterized by, remember when we talked about unitary as opposed to federal government or a federal system, we discussed that the central authority is usually superior and the subunits are considered subordinate, and the central government can actually pass orders to the state government. Sometimes the subunits do not even exist. All right. Now, let's take a look at the options. A. Independent powers for subunits not answerable to the center. No, this is a very federal principle. B. Subunits being subordinate to the central government, which can pass orders to them. Absolutely correct. This is what we discussed. C. Equal distribution of legislative powers between center and subunits. That's correct. That's not correct. In a unitary setup, of course, there are not going to be an equal distribution power when we have explicitly stated that the subunits are subordinate to the central authority. All right. D. Judicial oversight limiting central authority over subunits. Again, judicial oversight would be required in case of conflict resolution. If there is a dispute over domain between two levels of government. But here, when we have explicit supremacy to one form of government, one tier, then judicial oversight becomes unnecessary. All right. So we have our correct answer, which is option B. Question 6. Special provisions under Article 371 were inserted primarily to. Now we talked about how usually in a federal system, in a federal setup, the central authority and the subunits or states share power. Then we discussed how when we talk about a coming together federation, the states usually have almost equal powers because they are pooling their sovereignty and retaining their identity, right? However, when we are talking about holding together federations, we see that it is one sovereign authority sharing its power with its constituent units, and no, not all units. In India's case, not all states have equal powers, or not all units have equal powers. First of all, we have union territories which are administered directly by the central government. All right, they are big enough and yet cannot be merged with a state. All right, and they're not big enough to be declared states in themselves. So they have limited powers here. Now there are special provisions, if you read the Constitution, and which we will in further sessions, there are special provisions for different states. One of them is Article 371, and this happens to be in respect of states of Assam, Manipur, Arunachal Pradesh and Nagaland. All right. You may remember it with AMAN, AMAN. Now, these states had such peculiar circumstances historically that they had to be included under this article so that indigenous rights, and these are northeastern states, they have a lot of indigenous population, so that their rights may be protected. And you know, one of the features or one of the provisions of being under this particular article is that if you are not a permanent resident of the state, you cannot really own property in that state. This is why, because they have been marginalized for the longest time. They had peculiar historical circumstances which led to the development of this provision. All right. So why is this article required? The 371 article for special provisions to provide autonomy to union territories? No. To safeguard the right of indigenous communities in certain states? Yes, absolutely. We've also discussed the states. C. Ensure fiscal autonomy, resource-rich states? No. D. Prevent misuse of president's rule in border states? No. So, we have our correct answer, which is option number B. I hope this is clear. Question 7. The amendment process for power sharing arrangements in the Indian Constitution requires. Now, we discussed that when we are talking about power sharing in a federal setup, the central government cannot unilaterally means one-sidedly, amend or alter powers of the states or the state governments. All right, this we have read. So in order to make sure that there are double checks to this process and that both parties, both tiers of the government are involved in amendment, they made a very strict procedure. What was the procedure? That every time you have to alter the constitution like this, for this purpose, you will have to get a 2/3 majority of each house of the parliament along with a ratification by 50% of state legislatures. All right. So not only do we have to get a 2/3 majority of each house of the parliament, we discussed how difficult it is to get a 2/3 majority while we were discussing the impeachment of judges. And we discussed that it is really very difficult. Plus, 50% of the state legislatures also have to ratify, they have to agree to such an amendment. In order to make sure that both levels of the government are participating, 2 levels of amendment has also been introduced. I mean, amendment involves these 2 stages, okay, and also to double check. A, unilateral approval by the Union Parliament. Is this the way to change power sharing arrangements? No. Consent of both houses of parliaments with 2/3 majority and ratification by at least 50% or half of the state legislatures. Here, let's make it greater than equal to 50%. So this is our correct answer. The hierarchical structure of rural local government in India reflects federal decentralization through. Now, originally, and I've mentioned it earlier, originally the constitution involved only 2 tiers of government, which was the central and the state. Now, with the 1992 Constitutional Amendment Act, these were the 73rd and 74th Constitutional Amendment Act of 1992, the third tier was also introduced. All right. And this was what? Panchayati Raj for your villages and urban local bodies for your state, towns and cities. Okay. So this was a third level of government that was introduced because it was felt that local issues can be dealt with better by a local government. Also, they would also know better, the locals would know better what the issues are and how the budget needs to be allocated. So, in case of the villages, there is a Gram Sabha. This is how it's functioning. Gram Sabha consists of all voters of a village. These voters elect a few representatives which are called Panch, okay? And there is a president which is the Sarpanch. This elected council is known as Panchayat. All right? This is an elected council or an elected body elected by the Gram Sabha, and it functions under the supervision of the Gram Sabha. Now, what happens? Panchayats, different panchayats from different villages make what may be called a Panchayat Samiti or a block or a mandal. This is the collection of a few panchayats from different villages. Sometimes a few villages also elect one panchayat, okay? And then in a district, different samitis come together to form a Zilla Parishad. Zilla means district. Zilla Parishad is formed when these panchayat samitis, blocks or mandals come together. Now, similar to this process, we have municipalities for towns and municipal corporations for bigger towns, for cities. All right. So this works according to this hierarchy. Here there are wards, the way there are villages. Okay. So all you need to know is Gram Sabha, Panchayat, Panchayat Samitis, and then a Zilla Parishad. The counterpart in the urban local bodies happens with municipalities for small towns, municipal corporations for cities, bigger towns. Municipal chairperson is the president. Here, mayor is the head. All right. Now, at this level, MPs and MLAs may also be members of the Zilla Parishad. Moving on, Gram Panchayat at village level, Panchayat Samiti at block level, and Zilla Parishad at district level. This is correct. So we have our correct answer in the form of option A. Let's quickly take a look at other options. Direct central oversight of Gram Panchayats without intermediate bodies. No. We have seen here that one leads to this and then to this. All right. It is actually a hierarchical structure. There is no direct central oversight. Uniform election of all members without reservations. No. This is important. Whenever elections are held for panchayats as well as urban local bodies, there are reservations made for scheduled castes, scheduled tribes and other backward classes, and also reservations are made for women. 33% reservations are made for women. These are inclusive, all right, of the other reservations that we have discussed. The exclusion of MLAs and MPs from Zilla Parishad membership. No, we just discussed that MLAs and MPs are also a part of our Zilla Parishad. So we have arrived at the correct answer, which is option A. Question 9, the penultimate question. In which of the following ways has judiciary strengthened Indian federalism? A. By interpreting the constitution and acting as an umpire in disputes, of course. That is how it has maintained a harmony between different tiers of government. By acting as an umpire, by being an impartial spectator and judge. B. By granting residuary powers to the state. No, this would actually show or reflect a bias towards the state, all right? By abolishing the union list in favor of concurrent jurisdiction, again, would also reflect a bias towards the states rather than maintaining the principles of federalism. By ensuring proportional representation in Rajya Sabha. No, this is not the job of judiciary, all right? So we have our correct answer, again option A. Challenges in India's decentralization process include A. Over transfer of powers to local bodies leading to central inefficiency. On the contrary, there is actually an insignificant power transfer. It's almost none. It is actually ideal and desirable that there be some power transfer to the local bodies. All right, but the local bodies are suffering from the problems which are popularly known as the 3 F's, which are funds, functions, and functionaries. These are actually the problems that are plaguing our local bodies. There are not enough funds, all right? Not enough functions in the sense barely any power to carry out any functions and not enough functionaries. So there's not also a lot of manpower available with them, or there are a lot of vacancies and very few appointments. So this is not the answer. B. Irregular Gram Sabha meetings, limited power transfer and inadequate resources from states. Talks about funds. Like we discussed, there are inadequate funds. So this is our correct answer. Absence of women's reservation. No, we've discussed. It is actually remarkable that at the local level, women's reservations have been there. D. Complete financial autonomy for municipalities without state involvement. Absolutely no. This is something that is desirable, but not present. So we have our correct answer, which is option B. So before we move to our practice question, I'll again like to draw your attention towards the NCERT online course. For more information, please check the link in the description or dial 87501-87501. This is the question, your practice question. Coalition governments in India since the 1990s have contributed to federalism. Now, this is a bit of an application-based question. Though we have not discussed coalition governments directly, but if you have understood the principles of federalism, you'll be able to apply this to arrive at an answer. All right. Kindly note the question and send me the answers in the comments section. If you like today's section, please like, share, and subscribe. Thanks for watching.
For more informative content, like, share, and subscribe. And do not forget to press the bell icon to get the notifications.